Good morning, everyone. I work as a digital archivist at the University of Alberta Archives in Canada, but the project that I'm going to talk about today is related to my previous job. I worked for over a decade as a folklore archivist at the Cool Folklore Center at the same university. A little bit more information about myself, just to position myself in relation to this project. I'm originally from Ukraine. I was born and raised there. I came to Canada for almost 14 years ago to do my master's in folklore. Even before I graduated, I fell in love with folklore archives and eventually with archival world in general, and here I am. I feel very comfortable being in this audience of university archivists and folklore archivists. I feel myself in both worlds. The archival project I would like to talk about today is based on the cultural research project named Writings from the War. It's a volunteer-run project that aims to collect eyewitness reports on the current war in Ukraine, starting with Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine on February 24th of the last year. Here's the website of the project, and it's available in both Ukrainian and English. The mission of the Writings from the War project is to collect, preserve, and disseminate testimonials of Ukrainians who are living through the war, both in the original language and in English translation, and to provide a documentary source for researchers, academics, students, journalists, artists, and the public in general. The project has been carried out by the project team listed there on the screen since March 2022 in collaboration with the Cool Folklore Center at the University of Alberta. So back in 2022, when I was still an archivist at the Cool Folklore Center, around late March, we were approached by Alex Averbuch, who is the archive coordinator for this project, and he offered to donate these materials to our archives. It was quite easy, well, it was very easy to say yes, and not only because we wanted to support this initiative and wanted to help preserve these materials and these testimonials, but also because I believe this project fits very well into a folklore archives. Folklore archives often document ongoing events, often collect lived experiences of everyday people. So for a variety of reasons, and some of which I just named, these materials fell very neatly within our mandate. We spent following few months discussing various important aspects of this project with Alex. First of all, we talked about conditions of this donation. Alex requested my feedback on the consent form that he was designing, and the goal was to make it as accessible as possible and as short as possible, because many of the people at that time were not physically safe, and even if they were physically safe, they may not have been in the mental space to deal with lengthy bureaucratic paperwork. I had to clarify with the University Ethics Office whether we needed to apply for ethics permission clearance to do this kind of work, and we didn't. And we also talked a lot about how we are going to describe this collection and who should access it and how. We discussed what should be left out from the descriptions, simply because many people lived on, at that time, deoccupied territories, and again, for the considerations of safety. And also, the next point is November of last year, when Alex deposited the first batch of materials into the archives, and that's when I learned that I'm moving jobs. So I started actively processing this material in February of this year, and I did a lot of work in March, but this project is still going on. The testimonials are provided by different people, soldiers, volunteers, doctors, drivers, teachers, animal rights activists, cooks, artists, scientists, people of all kinds of professions. by adults and children, displaced persons, rescuers, and the rescued, anyone who was interested in sharing their experience with the world. As Alex states, this is a panoramic picture of the wartime every day, reflecting private experiences during the catastrophe. These are mostly textual and photographic records shared with the project team, primarily in Ukrainian, but also sometimes in Russian or in English. The earliest date back to February 24, 2022, and the most recent ones that I've seen are from early 2023. All the photographs, unless otherwise mentioned, are from the project itself, and this is a photograph of phosphoric bomb over Donetsk region. This is a map of Ukraine and its regions, and those that are marked with a yellow sheet icon are those where the testimonies come from. Certain cities are also specifically highlighted, not on the map, but in the project. You might have heard those names of the cities because there were many horrible events that happened in war crimes that included mass killings of civilians, tortures, rape, including child rape, and so on. These are Bakhmut, Mariupol, Izum, Bucha, and Irpin. The project team created broad thematic categories, and they classify all the testimonies using these topics: animals and animal rights activists, art and reflections, charity, humanitarian aid volunteers, eyewitnesses, internally displaced persons, medical care and emergency responders, military, and refugees. I should mention that testimonies are available on the project website that is run by volunteers, by the project team. However, they recognize that the website is not a reliable way to preserve the collection long-term, and that's why they wanted to work with an established archival institution. They also don't know how long they will be able to maintain the project. As I mentioned, they're all volunteers. They fundraise money and apply for grants when they can to be able to pay for hosting, website hosting, and to hire translators. All the other work is done voluntarily. And if you would like to help, there is a donate button on their website. We agreed that our role as archival institution was to preserve these records, but also to provide an alternative point of access to them. We use, you probably recognize, we saw already one instance of Atom today, and many people I know in the audience use it. There are currently just a bit over 100 testimonies in this database, and about 200 more have been deposited and are waiting to be added. We arranged the collection into files. Each testimony is a file, and it can consist of one or more items. A textual record, but also sometimes images. We use rules for archival description, the Canadian Archival Standard, to describe these materials. Title consists only of the first name of each individual. We decided not to use last name, again, for security reasons, plus a special numerical code developed by the project team. We have date, physical description. Scope and content is the field where we actually put the testimony itself in the original language. The availability of other formats field is where we put translations. We chose Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial 4.0 license for access and use. And there is an accession number that is assigned by the archives as a unique identifier. There are certain descriptive elements that will need to be added in the future. Some of them are subjects, and those 8, I think, categories developed by the team is one obvious way to tag these items. But we were also considering adding terms of another vocabulary. We will create authority records for creators in the future. As I mentioned, we decided not to provide any private identifiable information at the moment. So we just, their first name is in the title, but there are no indicated creators at this time. And we may need to rearrange the collection because we would like to to put testimonies from the same individual into one file, and currently they're just flat organization, collection, and files. And this is likely to happen after the war when it's safe to do so. And all this development and change of this collection reminds me of one of my favorite archival thinkers, Sue McCamish, who said that records are always in the process of becoming. This is a good example of it, I believe. I would like to share with you two excerpts from testimonies. The first one is from Mariupol. I go outside during the breaks between rounds of shelling. I need to walk my dog. She constantly twitches, trembles, and hides behind my legs. I just want to sleep all the time. My yard among the high rises is quiet and dead. I'm no longer afraid to look around. Opposite, the entryway to 105 is still burning. The flames have devoured 5 floors and are slowly chewing through the 6. In each room, the fire burns with restraint as though in a fireplace. The black, charred windows have no glass. You can see curtains like tongues tumbling out of them, gnawed by flames. I look at this calmly and feel doomed. I'm sure that I'm going to die soon. It's just a matter of days. In this city, everyone is constantly waiting for death. I just hope that mine is not too awful. 3 days ago, a friend of my older nephew came by and said that the fire department had been hit directly by a bomb. Some boys we knew and firefighters were killed. One woman had her arm, leg, and head blown off. I dream that my body will stay in one piece even after the bomb explodes. I don't know why, but this seems important to me. Not all testimonies are so heavy. There are many examples of wonderful help that people provide to each other, rescues, or just beautiful moments. And this one is one of my favorite that deals with one of such moments. And it's from Vasil from Kharkiv region. The scene was like something in a painting. In the middle of a burnt out wheat field, scattered with stains of unburnt vegetation, walking, not along the strip of trees the usual way, but straight across the field, a soldier was coming directly towards our forward positions, just as artillery fire was underway on positions that were about 500 meters behind his back. He was at a safe enough distance, but we are talking about ham-fisted butchers who might just as easily miss, or they might just decide to start firing in the middle of the field. And here was the fighter called Krim walking across that very field. So this Krim, a tall, slender guy, was now walking across the field in broad daylight under artillery fire, paying no attention at all to the shells flying above his head. But it wasn't clear why he kept crouching to the ground, even when no shells were exploding. This is just crazy. What's up, Jess? I can't believe it. What's going on? He's picking flowers. For the remainder of my presentation, I would like to talk about traumatic records, secondary trauma in archives, and trauma-informed archival practice. I use the definition offered by Nathan Schaffer and Castor. Traumatizing collections are purposeful gatherings of materials that seek to include the records of disruptive, violent histories. Efforts to document these events, for example, via testimonies, and or the subsequent activities that engage truth-telling, justice, and or reconciliation. As Anne Gilliland and Michelle Caswell point out, records have capacity to traumatize. There is a growing body of literature on trauma in archives, and most recently on secondary or vicarious trauma in archives. Many scholars deal with testimonies of genocide survivors, such as the Holocaust, or residential school survivors, or other atrocities, or those who experienced war. However, more often than not, archivists and archival scholars deal with traumatic archival records in the aftermath of the events. There are just some examples on the screen of the work done by archival scholars, and many of you will be familiar with the report by Nicolas Laurent and Kristen Wright on trauma in archives that came out just earlier this month, and it was a PCOM funded project shared on the SUV list. My knowledge about trauma in archives before I got involved in this project was very limited. As a researcher, I am interested in issues surrounding Indigenous records, but in my previous position, I hadn't worked with them. I did attend a workshop on trauma-informed archival practice last summer because of my interest in this area and because I was invited to participate in another project that deals with censored correspondence by KGB in the Soviet times. But all that knowledge was very lateral. I wasn't directly engaged in the work with traumatic collections until this Writings from the War project. And I found myself very ill-equipped for this work. The war and the trauma it's causing is ongoing. The testimonies often feel very personal to me. I know those places described. The war is happening in the country where I grew up. I also feel survivor's guilt, of course, and this is partially why I promised to myself that I will be reading those testimonies before I post them online. And it's going very slowly. I can only handle as much grief, even it's vicarious grief, at a single time. It feels somehow that by reading these testimonies, I honor those who shared them and I honor those experiences, and somehow it feels that I can take some of the load that they are carrying, although I know it's not true, really. I'm also thinking that this is the time to pass this work on to the current archivist at the Colfocal Center, as I've been doing this work on a volunteer basis, often on weekends and in the evening. But I'm thinking how I can support this new archivist, and I don't know yet. I was also a solo archivist, as she now is, in her position, but she is also a newcomer from Ukraine, and she has family there. And although the small team at the Colfocal Center, they're all wonderful people, very nice people, and very supportive, I don't know if they fully understand the potential impact of secondary trauma in archives, and that they can provide sufficient support for this work. I'd be happy to hear any recommendations from you or answer any questions. Thank you.